Hey folks, Quilly here, and welcome to another Unity 3D tutorial on how to make a multiplayer first-person shooter. And it is that time, finally, for us to introduce teams to the game. So there's actually quite a few topics that we're going to have to tackle to get this to work properly. For our context, teams are going to be very simple in that friendly fire will be disabled. That'll be basically the only difference at this point. Of course, later on, we'll do something like shared scoreboards and so on and so forth. The other thing we will do is we will try to color code our players based on their team. So to get started, let me go and just drop the player controller into the game field. So how can we identify which team this player on? So first of all, as we go forward, I'm going to make it so that the teams are just going to be numbered, team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4, or whatever. Or team 0, someone on team 0 is like free for all. Anyone can shoot someone on team 0. So in a pure deathmatch game, everyone is on team 0. And in most team games, it'll probably be team 1 versus team 2. So let's say that team 1 might be the red team and team 2 might be the blue team, to use some classic colors, which might be bad for certain colorblind people. But hey, the gaming industry apparently doesn't like you anyway. So we've got our character over there. Now, how can we change this person's color? Well, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. I mean, if you want to be like, if you want to be fancy, if you're playing a game where you're, terrorist versus counter-terrorist, then you might have completely different character models for each team. And that's a pretty easy thing to swap in and out. And it's probably something we'll look into at some point. You can keep the same player control. I mean, you could have a bunch of different prefabs. That's one possibility. Each one set up with a different character. But the other thing you can just do in the player controller is leave the player controller where it is, but then swap out the soldier object. The soldier object is the thing that has your animations and your model. Or you could drill down a little bit further in here, and while this hips, this is all your bones, your armature. This thing here is the actual model itself, and you can switch the models actually simply by changing the mesh on the skinned mesh renderer. Like, you could change this object here, or you could change this object over here. If you just want to reskin, if you want to keep the same model, but you just want to change the texture, you can do that by changing the texture and the material. There's lots of different ways. For our sake, to keep things really simple, we're not going to switch the models around because we just don't have a whole lot of models. What I'm going to do is use the main color here of the diffuse shader and just go really extreme. We're going to have one person be completely red like this, or one team be completely red like this, and another team be completely blue like that. Whoa, we might go with a brighter blue. Maybe midway like that. Sort of a bit more purpley, but as long as you can tell the difference between the two, that might be fine. We could also go red and green or something like that. Let me go and undo these changes. So we're back to our normal color by default over there. So that's visually how we're going to represent the two teams. But there's other things we could do. We could have added, we could add like name tags that hover over people's heads that have colors, or symbols, pick your poison. You can represent teams. It really depends on what kind of game you're making and what makes more sense, how realistic you're going to be, and so on and so forth. We'll just do the color thing because it's going to be easy. All right, so that's the visual question. The other question is, how are we going to track the data in terms of which team someone is on? And there's a few things. One thing we could do is, depending on how you like to program, some people like to have like a really big single script with all your data. I like to have a lot of small components, kind of like what we've been doing so far, especially in a tutorial kind of format. It makes it a lot simpler if each one of these scripts is, relatively simple and straightforward and easy to see, for example. So I think I'm going to keep that up. It might make some very logical sense to have the health script know which faction you're in, or the player shooting script to know which faction you're in, because one of the things over here is we check when we shoot someone, right? When we fire the weapon, then we find out what we hit, and then we check to see, hey, is this actually a player? And right here is where, we're not even checking to see if they're a player. We're just checking to see if they have a health component, and then we're applying damage over here. Well, we probably don't want to apply the damage to someone that's on our team. So it might make sense for the player shooting script to know what team we're on, or the health, or whatever, especially since we're already grabbing the health information over here. So, yeah, there's that. Plus, there's different possibilities. Like, just because you're on the same team, well, maybe you do want to allow friendly fire, depending on server settings. So, yeah, I can think of like a bunch of different ways that we might do it. Again, we're going to try to go with a relatively simple and straightforward way that might involve a little bit more hard coding for now, but you factor it out later. You get it working today, then make it work better later on when you need it to work. So, what I think I'm going to do, though, all that being said, I'm going to go with the with the path of we're going to have a dedicated component to handle this. So I'm going to create a new component, and it's going to be a new script. I'm going to call it Teamworks. Sometimes I use the word faction. Any one of those works, but yeah, I guess we'll team member. That's what we're going to call it. It's going to be a team member component. It's just a new script, and right now that script, right now, and maybe for the rest of the thing, I'm not sure, the script is just going to have one thing in it. It's going to have a public int, which is going to be the team ID. It's going to default to 0, and that's all there is to it. Okay, there we go. We're going to apply these changes to our prefab, so now all the player controllers will have this script. So in our player shooting, before we apply the damage, so at this point we know that the thing has health, and this is where we want to actually like say, hey, you should take damage. But before we do that, we're going to say, listen, the thing that I'm shooting, which is this hit transform. Hey, hit transform.get component team member. We're going to get their team member component. And then there's going to be a pretty big if. If team member is equal to null. If you don't have a team member component, then you're clearly not part of any team, and that probably represents something like a box, a crate, okay? They don't have a team member component, they're going to be fair game. Or they have a team member component, but the team ID is equal to 0. That's also going to be fair game. And then finally, they have a team member component, it's not 0. Is it ours? So if team member.teamID is not equal to this dot get component, and I don't need the this, but I like it for explicitness sometime in situations like this, dot team ID. Actually, I guess we should check to see if we've got one. Let me back up. Team member, my TM equals that. All right. So if our target has no team member component, or it's 0, or I have no team member component, or my team member component.id is equal to 0, that's another possibility. Then that means we can shoot. And then finally, if we verified all those things, then if team member.teamID is not equal to team member, or to my team member.teamID, then we all have valid teams, but we're not on the same team. So there we go. So we'll shoot. So it ends up being a little bit verbose, but it does kind of sort of check everything. So again, if the other person doesn't really have a team, or I don't have a team, or we have teams but they're not the same teams, then we can apply the damage. And under no other circumstances will we allow ourselves to do that. So there we go. So by default, right now we can still shoot crates, because crates don't have team member components. And right now we can still shoot each other because we by default have team ID 0. So right now it's still a free-for-all. So the next step is to assign to teams, assuming that we want a team-based game. And we'll go ahead and we'll implement the server in such a way that we can, actually maybe we can choose. Let's backtrack here. When we start the game, it asks us for a username and asks us if we want to join single player or multiplayer. On the screen here, we could specify what team we want to join. Also give it a random option, and maybe an option to stay neutral. If we want to join as, yeah, like a totally, or it's not neutral, it's literally like a free-for-all kind of person. You can shoot someone from both teams. It's sort of like, and other people who are renegades. I guess that would be it. It's team red, team blue, team like renegade, or random, which would just choose between red and blue. All right, I like that idea. So that GUI over here, where you connect, this is in our network manager, unless I'm wrong. Unless I'm wrong, and I am never wrong. Here is our GUI where we choose that. So we've got the name, single player, multiplayer. So between the username and button to actually connect to the server itself, we're going to go ahead and put in another set of selectors. I'm trying to think if you can do, if we want radio buttons or what. How do I want to do this, actually? It's a good question. I'm trying to remember. Give me a moment here. Unity GUI radio button. I'll bring it up to the foreground over here. GUI style radio button. Yeah, I'm trying. How do I want to display this? A menu? Maybe a button after you connect to the server before it spawns you. Oh, that's probably the best way to actually handle it. Okay, so we'll leave this first GUI, this first area here unchanged. So let's put the quote inside the if. We have not yet connected, so ask the player for online versus offline mode. That's what we're doing over here. So there's that. This is we are fully connected. Make sure to display the chat box. Okay, there's that. Now, the other thing we want to do is if we've connected, but we haven't spawned yet. So we have not assigned a team. So that's what we're gonna do here. So right now, when we join room, we go spawn my player. We're not going to want to do that quite yet. Instead, we're going to want to prompt for a team. Now, here's an interesting thing. Rather than respawning after a timer, you could let people to pick teams every time they die. I don't think we're going to do that. So let's just put a little flag in here that says, well, just make a Boolean. Has picked team. Because I can see like 30 different ways we want to handle the team selection. I'm just going to go the very simple route. When you connect, if it won't spawn you until you've picked a team, which could even be random or Renegade, that would be okay. Once this flag is set, then we'll spawn at that point. So we're going to remove the spawn my player over here. We'll comment it out. And then up here, we're fully connected, but we haven't actually... If has picked team, then we will display the chat box and everything will work the way it's supposed to. Else, player has not yet selected a team. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to ask for a player to select the team, and then once they've done that, we will then spawn them in as the correct team. I suppose, actually, we're going to need to keep track of what team has been selected, because when we spawn the player, we have to... Oh, we can pass that here. Instead of spawn player being like this, we can say spawn my player int team ID. We can require a team ID for spawning a player. I like that, because we can add a step over here. Mono behavior, my player go get component. Well, we don't want to do it quite this way. My player game object dot get component. Now, I'm a big fan of using these for the get components, which would be team member, because that works beautifully. Because then it even knows the correct class. So then you can set the team ID to be equal to the team ID that was passed, for example. We can do that. If these sort of constructions don't work for you, you need to make sure you update to the latest version of Unity. So I'm going to do that. That way you don't have to do casting afterwards, and it's just so much sexier. And you know what? It's time. Upgrade your Unity. So we're going to set the team ID over here. To do also set color. We'll get that done in just a second. So, team ID, so great. So over here, we have not yet picked a team. So let's go and make some buttons. We'll just, I don't know, you know what, we'll grab this code because it does things nicely centered. I don't like the fact that this onGUI function is so big. Often I might make like a bunch of smaller functions to run these, but this will be okay. So this is going to create an area that's boxed, and we're going to make a series of buttons in the middle of the screen. That's just going to be called red team. Let's clear this out. Blue team, random, and we'll call the last one Renegade. Okay, so what does it mean when we join a team? Well, pretty much the only thing it means is we're going to go spawn my player. So red team will be team 1. Oh. Blue team will be team 2. on random, we will do random.range 0 to 2. When you pass integers, the numbers will be one less from this maximum. So this will either generate a 0 or a 1. And then on Team Renegade, or wait, sorry, we want to do it this way. This will generate a 1 or a 2. And then on Team Renegade, we are going to spawn as Team 0, which means anyone can kill us and we can kill absolutely anyone. All right, just so that we can confirm that all these different variations work fine. So 1 or 2 is what that will do. Assuming I haven't screwed that up, but I think we're okay. So over here, when we spawn the player and we've got the team ID, we're setting the team member ID, and then we want to set the color. So we're going to do that by myPlayerGo. We're going to find this skinned mesh renderer in our children, and we're going to set the color. It's going to be a little bit awkward because we're going to have to descend down the tree, aren't we? Because we can go with .transform, find child, get component. I think get component in children is literally just direct children, isn't it? Didn't I run into this problem before? I think that's true. Let me check the docs. Or any of its children using depth first search. Okay, so this should actually work. Well, let's find out. I think it might be the find child that only gets the immediate child. Well, let's find out if this works. So what we're looking for is the very first instance of a skinned mesh renderer is really what's going on. Skinned mesh renderer. My skin is equal to that. And then my skin should have material on it. Actually, before we do this, if my skin equals no debug.log error. Couldn't find a skinned mesh renderer. Bit of an error message there. Then we'll just sort of keep going. So like we could return at this point. No, it's fine. We'll spit out the error and then keep going. So myskin.material. There's a materials array, and material is a shortcut to the very first material in the array. We're going to call that good enough. If you did have a multi-material object, then you might have to pick the right one to retexture. And a good example of something like that is you might have a material that's just, say, the vest, and so you could just recolor the vest instead of doing the whole thing. But our model just has one material, so that'll work out okay. And our material has a parameter called color, and we're going to change that. So if team ID is equal to team 1, that's red. So we're going to set the color to color.red. If team ID is equal to 2, then we'll set it to blue. But as I recall, the full blue is a little too bright, or a little too dark, so we'll actually go new color and what other things? So yeah, so we're going to go and give it a half red, a full blue, and then a half green, and that should make it a bit of a lighter color. So yeah, we'll just assign the color that way, and that should give us, I think, what we want. Let's find out how many problems we've done. Oh, there's an overloaded method. Oh, because we're respawning. We're respawning the player. So when we respawn it, right now we want to respawn onto the same team that we were before. So do we keep track of what team was picked here in the network manager? I think we're going to have to. Because at this point, our player object is dead. If our player object wasn't dead, we could do something like myPlayer dot, team ID or something like that. So over here, we'll go int team ID equals 0. Not that it really matters here. And then when we push the button, or when we spawn the first time, we'll go ahead and just cache that. This dot team ID is equal to team ID. Oh, am I spelling things differently? I am. Like so. And then we'll pass that. All right, so this sets the member variable to the one that was passed to the function. We can keep track of that. We'll spawn it here. We'll do checks to see which one we are. Set the color, and then we respawn. We should respawn on the same team. Well, let's see. Let's make sure we've applied any changes to the prefab, although I don't think we had any. We're going to go ahead and play. So I'm going to join, doesn't really matter, single player. Good. It's asking me for a team. I will pick red team. And if I find my character, I am indeed vivid red. Oh, and then the pop-up doesn't go away. Oh, because I need to set that has picked teams equal to true. There we go. Get rid of that. One thing I could do is just set like the initial team ID to like -9,000 or something like that, and then just base whether we show this pop-up on whether the the team ID is -9,000. So blue team. Oh right, RGB. Actually, the green's quite nice. Maybe we should stick with like red team, green team. We'll do that. But yeah, the problem is here I did full green instead of full blue. It should have been 0.5, 0.51. But I like the green, so I'm going to do that. So that should be okay. Now, if I join again and I'm a Renegade, it should set no color whatsoever. Indeed, that's true. And if we look at our faction, our team member, we're still in team 0. And the final test, we'll hit random once and trust that it works. So it randomized me to be on team 1. It does say team 1 over here, and I am all red. Excellent. Okay, so we've done that. Now let's see if we can still kill each other. So we will go ahead and do a build. Build, build, build. Build, build. Build, build. Okay. We'll do that. I'll connect on the host as well. So multiplayer. Okay. Oh. Did it spawn me right away? It should not have done that. Why is it spawning me right away? This shouldn't be running. I don't have a button. The heck? What, is it doing that in single player? No. Oh my god, there's probably someone else playing right now. Since we've made some pretty significant changes to the game, I think it's time to bump our version number for connecting to the server. We're going to call this version 4. I think there's still someone connected to the game. Oh, no, that's that test. Okay, we still have to do a rebuild. Let's try again here. I'm just going to launch my build. Every now and again that happens. I'm practicing and there's someone else there. Okay, we'll get that started. And then I'm going to go over here. Multiplayer. Okay, good. Yeah, there's no one here on the server now because we're connecting to a room that has a different version number. I will join Team Red. I'm indeed here. Now, my second player, I will go multiplayer. And I will join Team Green. We are not sending the team IDs over the network. Okay. So I will look green to myself. But that's... Okay, what's my timer at? We might have to split this into 2. Unfortunately, we're going to have to split this into 2 episodes. So, everything's working pretty well locally, but we are not syncing the team information over the network, so that will be the next episode. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.